Welcome! I'm so glad you're here. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Confident Parent podcast, the podcast you need to listen to bring more joy, more ease, and more intention so that you can be the parent you want to be for your kids. I am so excited to have Blimie Heller from Unconditional Parenting here with us in the studio today. So Blimie, please introduce yourself to us.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, so I am Blimie Heller, a parenting coach and educator and a mother who is very passionate about supporting parents and building relationships with their children based on respect and trust. For me, that's what I consider my life project, my life passion. I consider myself somewhat of a child advocate as well. And yeah, this is what I love to do.
Amazing. Wow, there's so much there that I really want to ask you about. So, unconditional parenting. Tell me a little bit more about what went into the name, what's behind the name.
Yeah, to be honest, I felt a little lost when I started up my business. I was like, what should I call it? I couldn't decide because I really, for me, actually, I'm against the idea of like a certain of having a name because I don't even think of what I do as a parenting approach. It's really more about, so like I said, supporting parents to build relationships based on respect and trust. It's not about what to do or how to do it. It's more about certain principles and sharing them with parents. And so I was really struggling. And then there's a book that was very inspiring to me on my journey called Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn. And I remember the title stood out to me because I love that it was love without conditions. And it wasn't parenting without conditions. It wasn't unconditional love. It was unconditional parenting. Like he brought it into like that when we parent, it should be a relationship without conditions. And
Right.
I really loved that. So I thought that's why I used that name.
So can you give us like a little bit of an example of what you mean when you say it should be like parenting without conditions?
Yeah. So for me, what happens is because as parents, we are, our children are given to us to help support them, to nurture them, to teach them right from wrong, to set them on the right path. What happens very often is that we sometimes we feel very responsible. And then we also sometimes feel desperate. Like, how do I teach them this thing? Or how do I make sure they do this? And what
Or
we
how
end
do
up
I fix this kid, right?
Yeah, exactly. How do I like fix them and make them be like so? And what happens is I find is that we often then end up making the relationship because parenting is a relationship. It's a relationship with my child. That's first and
True.
foremost what it is. I
Yeah.
end up making it transactional, like making conditions on it in order to get my child to do what I want them to do, or to because I'm so worried, because I'm really trying to help them. And so I might say, like, I'll only spend time with you if you do this. And I'll only, and or even not making the relationship conditional. Even see, relationships are not only about us spending time with the other person. If I, let's say, take away a privilege from my child, that also affects the relationship because I'm the one who's doing it. So, and in some way,
Yeah.
I am sending them a message of like, what matters to you is not as important as me trying to get you to do the thing you need to do or whatever. And so that can impact the relationship. And so for me, that's what it means to put conditions. It's like everything is conditional. It's like, you only get the privilege if you do this. And now when I share this, I think a lot of parents feel very overwhelmed, they're like, what do you mean? Like, this is how everybody parents. This is how the only way to make sure that my kid does. Like, what are you saying? Are you saying it's wrong or bad or, that I shouldn't do it? So that's a whole other time. That's like yeah.
Because I mean that's kind of what I was going to ask you next is because a lot of times people hear about this, relationship and um, I don't know if you've said it explicitly, but I hear it in what you've been saying is that I think like you, like me, we both believe that parents are trying to do the best for our kids, right? We really all trying to do the best and do the best and it's all coming from a good place and a good intention that we want the best for our kids, right?
Yes, of course.
And sometimes like when parents kind of hear this idea of like parenting without conditions or the putting the relationship first and foremost, there's this pushback that sometimes I hear, I'm sure you've heard it too, of like, but does that mean that anything goes? So tell
Yeah.
me what your response to that is.
Yeah. So first I want to say that I don't believe that the way that I do things or my approach or what I believe in is the only way or the right way, and everybody else who does it differently is wrong. Or it's simply that I personally, to me, it's so important, the relationship. I have, there's so many reasons why to me the relationship is the most important thing, that I want to preserve it. And if it resonates with any other parents, I love sharing it with them. So that's first of all. It's not that I have the best or the right approach necessarily, but
And I want to come
also,
back to that because I feel like
yeah,
there's a story there that I want to hear if you're comfortable sharing.
of
But
course, of
keep
course.
going.
Yeah. So, but then if parents, let's say, do want it, but they're like, wait, but then that means that I just, everything's allowed. Like there's no boundaries, there's no limits, and yeah, I totally understand that fear, because when we're so used to the paradigm of, if you do this, then you'll get that. And if you don't do this, then you won't get that. And that's the way that I, get you to do what I need you to do from the best place. Like you said, we have such good intentions. Um, yeah, very often we jump to the other extreme where we're just like, okay, so that means that there's just like absolutely no limits and no boundaries. And for me, there really is a middle road or a path. Maybe it's not even the middle, it's just a path where actually talking to your children and having a relationship with them, that has the biggest impact. And in that way, you transmit your values. And in that way, you set them on the right path. And in that way, you get them. Well, you don't get them to, but you help them, support them in doing what it is that they need to do. It's so, sometimes it's so subtle. I actually just had a conversation with my child the other day. She watched another family who was visiting us. She watched how their parents, by like when it came time to go to bed, how the parents went about it. And they're like, it's bedtime, let's go to bed, and kind of like made them stop doing what they're doing and go to bed. And my child, it came over to me and she said, wow, the way they do bedtime is so differently than the way we do it. And I said, what do you mean? And so she said, I don't know, like something about like, it felt like they were forced to go to bed. And she's like, with me, I do end up going to sleep more or less the same time every day, but I don't know, I don't
Right.
feel forced to it. It's so different. I thought it was so cute how she was trying to explain it, but that's what I mean. It's some people think, oh, so then if you don't have bedtimes and the kids just, you neglect them and they go to sleep at like 2 a.m. every night. There's no structure. And the thing is that my child does go to sleep more or less the same time every single day, but the way it's done is so different. It's not like go to bed, and if you don't go to bed now, then right. Yeah, it's more relationship based. It's more, let's go to bed, and it's more gentle and respectful. And I mean, gentle, I don't love that word, but yeah, it's I don't even see, it's hard to explain it. Yeah.
So to walk us through, I guess, because for those of us that want to understand, like practically, right? Walk us through what does bedtime look like?
Yeah. So maybe bedtime is not the best example, but okay, let's say in my
Any
house.
example? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is when it comes, people often when I speak, people are like, give me a practical example. What do you mean? Like and the thing is that I could give a practical example, and I will in a moment. Maybe I won't do bedtime because I think that's a little bit, I'm worried people are going to think that they have to do it the way that I do it. I take something that's a little bit more simple. Like let's say a child who needs to wear a helmet when they're riding a bike. I'll give that example. Does that
It's
seem
a
something?
great example.
Okay. Before I go there, I want to say though that for this whole way of parenting or doing things, it exists in a larger framework. It's not just like, oh, this is how to do this, and this is how to do that, and this is how to do that. Every parent will find their own unique way of doing it. But it's more about a certain way of looking at things. Do you hear what I'm saying? For me, that's so much more important than what to do. But I will share what to do.
Yes,
How I do it. How I do it. I say, not how every parent needs to do it. Okay. Yeah.
right.
So let's say my child, they need to wear a helmet, right? So very often when let's say the mainstream approach or whatever is to come in and say, you need to wear a helmet when you're riding a bike. And if you don't ride a bike when I'm taking away your bike for a week or whatever, just to be like, I need to make sure that you do. So there's the condition right there, and you're like, I'm taking it away. Versus what I would do is first I would try to, okay, the first thing is, of course, I set the boundary same way. I say, listen, when you ride a bike, you need to wear a helmet. The first thing I do is also try to explain, because a lot of times children don't understand why it is that they need to do whatever it is they need to do. So I find that it's helpful if they understand there's sort of it's easier for them to cooperate because they have an understanding. Now, whenever I say that, people say you have to explain everything to your kid. What if you can't explain it? What if that's a whole, I already hear the questions whenever I say something, but okay. So first I like to, yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're saying that. And I think also sometimes there's two purposes to explaining, right? Because sometimes it's like I explain because I want them to understand that you put on a helmet, right? I want them ultimately when they're teenagers and it's not cool to wear a helmet to be so deeply ingrained in themselves that it's safe, you got to protect your brain, etc., that they still wear the helmet. And sometimes I think it also helps with the relationship thing because what comes to mind is for me is teeth brushing, right? My younger kids especially, they hate that I brush their teeth, right? And it can come across like if you put yourself in the mind of a child, right? And there's this adult in your life who's forcing you to brush your teeth. And in the moment, even if you've told them once before, it's just like, I don't want to do it. Like, why are you making me do it? And if you just explain, like, I'm doing it because I want your teeth to be strong, it puts it front and foremost in the minds of the child that actually I'm doing this because I love you and I care about you, right? So there's that dual purpose of explaining, and even if and interestingly enough, I don't know if you experience this, but I find that often when I explain it to them, it helps me have more empathy for them, right? Because like then it's like
Yes.
I'm slowing down and I'm like put getting into their world and what's it like for them and explaining to them why it's important. So the explaining bit
Yeah.
is a huge
Yeah.
piece of that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you explain that. It's exactly what I say. It's exactly, there's two things. It's that first that they understand and also for the relationship. And I love what you said about it helps me empathize, you empathize. It also helps me. And the reason why it helps me is because then it becomes, I'm doing this for this reason, and it doesn't become you against me. Very often when we don't share the reason, it feels like it's me against the child. I'm pushing
Right.
for the helmet, they're pushing against the helmet versus no, the helmet is for you for safety, and then it's easier. Okay, so anyway, so first I will explain. And then let's say
Yeah.
the child, but I don't want to, but I don't want to, I still don't want to, but it's uncomfortable. Then what I do is I try to work with them. So I try to understand where's the resistance coming from? Why do they not want to? Is it uncomfortable? Is there a way to make it more comfortable? I try as much as possible to work with them to see if there's something that we can do. I try to also say, like, maybe we'll do it a little bit at a time, whatever it is, like maybe we'll only ride our bike for a little bit so that way you get used to it slowly, whatever it is, we just try to work together. Then if we try to
Love
work
that.
together, yeah, then if I try to work together and all that, and even after all that, the child still doesn't wear the helmet, which by the way, most parents jump to that. Whenever I share this, like, okay, but what if they still don't wear it? And I'm going to answer that in a second, but I want to slow down for a moment and say, if that happens very often, that the child refuses, then there's something else going on, meaning it very rarely happens. Me parenting this way and knowing other parents who parent this way, it of course it happens sometimes. The child just resist. Of course it does happen. I'm not saying that, oh, if you do this, they're always going to cooperate with you, but it doesn't happen that often. Most of the time, if you explain and you have empathy and you try to work with them, somewhere between those things, it happens. Whatever needs to happen happens. If it always goes to that they resist, something's going on. There's a reason why the child's resisting. Okay, but let's say the child does still resist even after I did everything.
And can I just weigh in something before you jump into that? Because I
Sure.
think so often we what happens in that thing is there is a miscommunication, right? Like the kid is saying no, and there's a reason why, right? The helmet's not comfortable or whatever, or they don't understand or something. There usually is a reason, and that's why the slowing down on our part, because we live in such, I mean, parents have so much on our plates, right? We live in such a highly pressured society that sometimes even just the act of slowing down the whole thing can pull out what's going on here that we can both get on the same page. Yeah, so
Exactly. I
yeah,
love
so
what you
what
said there. I would say there's always a reason why a child resists. There's always a reason why any of us resist. There's for me the like the oh, what's the word? I lost the word now. The principle
behavior?
behind that,
Right.
is that there's a need driving every single one of our behaviors. So if a child's resisting, there's always a need. And that's why for me, that's the framework that it exists in. Once I trust that and I understand that, things become less scary to me because it's like, oh, There's a reason. If I can find out, we can work this out. And very often I think parents feel very stuck. I used to. My child would resist, and suddenly I was like terrified, panicked. Oh my gosh, how am I going to get my child to go? What am I going to do? How do I, and the thing is that once I was like, oh, there's a need behind it, it softened me, and I got more curious, and I trusted more that, oh, there's a way through this. Yeah. And I love that about, like, we rush. We're so busy as parents. And so it helps to slow down. It's also hard to slow down. And I don't want any parent to feel like I have to slow down. The have to's are such pressure. It's like, I want you to feel moved to slow down. And that's my hope always in what I share, is that you feel moved to, my teacher, he says, taking time saves time. And I really find that it's so true so much of the time. Okay, but let's say your child does resist. Let's say you don't have the time and the space to do the collaborate for whatever reason, they're still resisting. At that point, then I would say, listen, I need to keep you safe. I'm very, very clear on the fact that I need to keep you safe and that I am not going to compromise on that. I don't know how else to do it aside from not letting you ride the bike unless you're wearing the helmet. I'm willing to give the bike. It's not I'm taking it away for a week or a month or nothing. I'm willing to give you the bike as soon as you wear the helmet, but until you wear the helmet, I can't let you ride the bike because I don't know how else to keep you safe. So you see how a parent might do the very same thing, but it's a punishment. Well, they'll say, because you're not wearing a helmet, you can't have the bike. And so it comes across as like, I'm doing this punitively to teach you a lesson because you're bad, because you're doing something wrong. Whereas from me, it's coming from a place of, I'm firmly standing for this need for safety. I'm not willing to compromise. I want to work with you. I'm willing to work with you. I don't know how else to do it other than to say, you can't ride the bike without a helmet. And that's what comes through. So you see how the whole thing is just so different, but I'm still standing very firmly for not riding the bike without a helmet. I'm still not going to let that happen. At the end of the day, I'm still holding the boundaries and the limits. And yes, so that was an example.
Yeah, that was a beautiful example. I really loved how you do it. And I really think it highlighted a lot of how so much of it is internal, right? Is the work that we kind of do first, right? The work that we kind of do to understand this human being that we have and to, soften, to empathize, to try and, the curiosity as well is also such a big one. Because again, I think we live in a society that there's a lot of fear around parenting. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of judgment as well. And it's so hard not to get caught up in, right? To kind of like take the step back. And I also wanted to say is that I love that you highlighted the fact about like don't feel the pressure to slow down, because also slowing down is different in different phases of life, right? Like for a mom who has a kid and a baby, a newborn, right? Like the added pressure of slowing down is so much, right? Whereas if your kid is 12 and easygoing and whatever, slowing down is so much easier, right? So I love that you kind of said that don't feel the pressure, but feel motivated towards slowing down, because that's really important point as well. You mentioned right at the beginning about being a child advocate. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so you touched on that briefly, that as people, we're all wired to first see and understand our own perspective. Of course, we are ourselves, and that's how we're supposed to be, to understand ourselves and what is it that we want. And it's a little harder to understand another person's perspective. I think everybody can relate in any relationship. It's just another person is a whole other being. And sometimes it's hard to understand where are they coming from and why is it so important to them, or why are they upset about this, or why are they pushing for that? A lot of times we see things from our perspective and we judge them and we think like, that's stupid, or that's not a big deal, or I don't understand, right? And because we're seeing it from our perspective. But when we take the time to see it from their perspective, a lot of times we're moved and we're like, oh, that's what's going on for them. And suddenly we're touched and we're like, oh, I have so much compassion. Oh my goodness, it's a big deal to you because you really want to be taken seriously, or because you really want connection. Or so with children, I find it's the same thing. It's very hard as a parent when you have to make sure that they do certain things and you have to take care of them every single day. It's very hard to see their perspective. When they resist, or when they push back, or when they're upset, or when they whine, it's very hard as a parent to stay connected to what's going on for them. And I see it when I call myself a child advocate. what I try to do is share the perspective of a child so that parents can feel touched and can feel moved, like, oh, that's what's going on for my child. And then, like I said, rather than feel pressure to, they can feel moved to, like, hey, oh, I want to do that. Again, only if they're able to or when they can. Of course, all of us have, it's not, we're not always going to feel moved to. But yeah, so I try to share the perspective of a child. I think that very often it's because they're children and because also we're trying to get them to do whatever it is they need to do. We forget or we don't take the time or we don't understand what the perspective is of a child.
Yeah. And you're right, you put it into context, it's always hard for us, right? If you think about most conflicts happen
Yes,
because we
exactly.
we we don't we everyone's stuck in their viewpoint and they can't see the other viewpoint. And when you can kind of see the other viewpoint, you can kind of start moving together. So that's beautiful. And I
Exactly.
think it's also our kids learn for better and for worse, right? From who we are. So when we can kind of model that, right? That we're looking into at their perspective, hopefully we're giving them like skills, lifelong skills of really how to build solid relationships, which is at the end of the day, I think what we want to do most for our kids is to set them up with those tools for a successful, happy life. So I
Yeah.
that's really important point that you brought up there.
Oh,
Blimie,
I love that you mentioned that. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say that, yeah, like for me, you're touching on another such an important point is that for me, like children learn the most, not only children, all humans through absorption, but especially children. They're literally sponges when they're younger. Most through absorption. They learn the most from who we are and how we act. Just by being around us, it goes into their being by osmosis, like without us even trying to. That's just what happens. And yeah, so for me, like a huge part of this is that exactly, I try to live what I want them to learn because children do learn what they live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone ever doubted that kids learn the most from they are, it's like no matter how you grow up and you think that you're going to parent differently, and then you have kids and you open your mouth and your mother comes out, and it's like, what?
Exactly.
We
Exactly.
yeah, we
Exactly.
learn.
Yeah, and even by the way, parents who take my course will sometimes tell me, I find myself talking like you, or with something comes up, I hear you on my shoulder, like how to do this with my child. And it shows that even adults are learning through absorption. Like they learn so much through just listening and watching how somebody else is doing it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. If there's one thing that you wanted parents to know, what would it be?
Mm. Yeah, I saw that question earlier because yeah, you sent them to me before and it was so hard for me. I was like, how do I choose one thing? And then when I thought about it, I was like, actually, I think the one thing I would want them to know is that there is no, I mentioned this already briefly, which you said you want to hear more about. That I don't believe that there is one right way to parent, or if there is, that anybody knows what that is. Yeah, I believe that none of us know anything for sure, and the reason why I think it's so important for me for parents to know this is because, like I said, as soon as we think that there is one right way or that one way is the right, we feel pressure and we feel like we have to, and what I find is that it takes us away from having compassion for ourselves. And and then when we don't have compassion for ourselves, it's very hard for us to have compassion for our children and to really show up in the way that I wish that we would show up to be fully ourselves, compassionate towards ourselves, compassionate towards our children. And so, yeah, for me, it's so important that parents hold on to this idea of like, I can follow myself. I can look at all the advice that's out there and listen to the information. Of course, there are people who have a lot of amazing information. And of course, there are people who have much more experience or have researched certain topics. I'm not saying that people don't know things, but that we have the permission to listen to what people have to say, to the wisdom people share, and to see how we want to integrate it into our lives, to see, does this resonate? Does this not? Maybe it does resonate, but at this point in my life, I'm just not there. Maybe right now it's not where I'm at. And so to be able to have the permission to take what resonates, to meet ourselves where we're at, and to go at our pace and to be fully ourselves in how we integrate parenting practices.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Yes, and you reminded me that I feel like there's some sort of story about how you came to your approach to parenting. You want to share it with us, or tell us how you a little bit
Yeah.
more?
Well, yeah. Well, there's like there's a journey that I've been on, but I'll briefly say that my own childhood combined with me struggling when I became a parent is what led me down this path of like, tell me, give me more information. Like I need help with how to do this. And so I sought out a bunch of information and a lot of it resonated with me and I took it and adopted it as my own. And I became so passionate about it and excited by it that I would share with everyone around me. And then eventually that led to me giving courses and sharing it on Instagram and becoming a parenting coach. And what I found was that even as I was sharing all this information with parents, something always in my body was telling me, like, this doesn't feel right. Something feels off. And I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know how to listen to it because I didn't know what was really going on, but I felt it. Something felt
Right.
off. And then I started taking courses in something called nonviolent communication. It's a really, the name is really, even the person who created it, his name is Marshall Rosenberg. He regrets the name because as soon as people hear it, I think they think of something totally different. But anyway, we can call it compassionate communication. And I started taking courses in that. And then I started realizing like, yes, this is what I'm looking for in the way that I teach or the way that I give over information. I realized what it was that was bothering me. What was bothering me was that I didn't give over information in a way that was compassionate to parents. I was telling them all
Oh,
day
wow.
about how to have compassion for their children. Like I said, I advocate for children. And so I was trying to show the child's perspective and advocate, but what was missing was compassion for parents. And it was like, how can I teach compassion for children if I don't even have compassion for their parents? And like I said, then parents don't have compassion for themselves. And so for me, it was like just a slow shift that started happening. And I realized I don't like the way I'm sharing information. I don't like how I'm doing this. And I want to pivot. And I announced it on Instagram, everywhere where I share stuff. I made an announcement saying, like, I don't like the way I've been sharing information until now, and I want to change. I don't like this. I want to have
Mhm.
more compassion. I don't want to do the have tos and the shoulds. I don't know for sure what you should do or what you for sure have to do. I can only share what I'm passionate about, my experience, what I see, and also hold you with a ton of compassion because you're people too. At the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all trying. And so that's yeah, that shift happened about, I don't know, a year or two ago. I don't remember even. Yeah, and ever since then and it's still I'm still shifting, meaning
Right.
I'm ever, the same way parents were always learning, or as people, I'm still integrating this. I'm still learning more and more how to embody self-compassion for everyone, including myself.
It's just listening to you, so powerful, and it's so like that compassion piece. I think is so powerful, and I love how you said about we're talking about compassion for children, and we have to have that compassion for parents for ourselves, right? It reminds me of in the morning prayers in Judaism. Every morning we thank God for giving us back our soul, and we say, God, the soul that you have given me is pure, right? And to me, this is the epitome of like how we should be looking at ourselves. Doesn't matter what we did yesterday, right? And if you think about it to the extreme, like it doesn't matter what anyone did the day before, they still wake up and they still say, "I have a pure soul." And I think that piece of separating out who we are from what we have done is so Jewish and so compassionate, right? And it's also I've right like it's when we can do that, right, for ourselves, for our kids, we're in a different we're able to live differently because we're able to admit that we've done things wrong because it doesn't threaten us the same way, right? If we understood so deeply that I have this pure soul, right? And yeah, I'm going to mess up. I messed up a million times. I'm going to mess up a million times, right? But it doesn't affect who I am. Then
Yes.
we can own those mistakes and fix them. And it's
Yeah.
and it's like that. I think that's the compassion piece that you're talking about, and like hearing you do that, and hearing you say that you were able to like announce it publicly. That's like that's like incredibly powerful. So it's, I mean, for parents, right? What would you say to them about how to incorporate more compassion into their
Their
parenting?
their parenting, yeah. I mean,
Themselves, their parenting. I mean, tell us a
yeah,
bit
for
more.
themselves, essentially. Yeah, I mean, there's probably so many ways to do it, but I really like the approach what you spoke about. And this is what I advocate for children and for parents. And yeah, like what you said, like who you are isn't what you do isn't who you are. And the way that I make that very, very practical is for us to understand, like what I mentioned earlier, that every single one of our behaviors is driven by a need. So Hashem put into us needs. I actually think of them as divine sparks of Hashem, the needs that we have. And our needs drive our behavior. Now, we can meet our needs in a way that is appropriate and contributes to other people and is aligned with our values. And we can meet our needs in a way that isn't. That's really the whole struggle of being human. We can meet in a way that hurts other people, that doesn't align with our values, that hurts ourselves in our relationship with our God or whatever it is. And so for me, it's understanding that even though, so I was anytime I did something, if I did something that hurt somebody else, hurt myself, wasn't in alignment with my values, I was trying to meet a need. So underneath that, there's something good, there's something pure, there's something godly, there's something divine underneath what I did. So, and that's always, and that's me. That's me. And so if I can connect to, let's say I yelled at my child, okay? So I can be like, oh, yeah, what was I trying to do in that moment? Why was I yelling? It's like, yeah, I was so desperate. I wanted cooperation so badly. That's what I was seeking. I was seeking cooperation. I was moved to create cooperation. The strategy that I used, I regret. I feel really sad. I feel sad about it because I don't want to hurt my children and I don't want to, and also it doesn't even feel good for me. Like it's not, my integrity is off when I yell because I don't want to do that. My care doesn't want to do, like the place where I care doesn't want to do that. And so inside of me. And so I connect to, yeah, it was coming from a place of wanting cooperation, which is pure and good. But the way I did it, I regret and I feel sad about. And for me, that's how I connect to self-compassion. There's like exactly what you said. Like when we recognize that we are not what we do. But for me, the way I make it practical is to understand like what my need was and to really be touched by my need. Then I actually experience compassion in my body for myself. Instead of being like, you're wrong or you're bad for doing that. It's like, no, you were trying. You were trying to meet a need. Yeah, like I want to find a different way. I don't want to do it again. I want to try as much as possible to find a different way. But yeah, it was coming from a place inside of me that wasn't bad.
I love that. I love how you took this like broad, vague thing about compassion and self-compassion, but you've actually given us a really powerful practical tool to actually bring that into our lives. And so thank you for that.
My
Final
pleasure.
question that I want to ask you is, although I've loved talking to you so far, and I could talk to you for a lot longer, but
Yeah, same.
is like a parenting myth that's out there that if you could if you could show parents this isn't true, what
Yeah.
would it be?
Again, it's like so many things come at me, but I think what I would say is that children don't need to be made into good people. I think that it's huge parenting myth out there, and there's so many implications to that. Like we believe that children aren't, even though we'll say like, oh, neshamas are pure and there's a pureness inside of us, we don't live as if we really truly believe that children really possess inside of them the desire to do good, to be good. And yeah, and I think it's a myth that's subconscious. Many of us don't realize that we carry it around with us, thinking that without my intervention, without me making them into a good person, they're going to be a horrible person. I didn't even realize how much I was carrying that. I love people, and I always loved loving people, and I loved Blimie Heller from Berditchev because he loved people, and I was always touched by that. But I didn't realize it was very deeply ingrained in me. It was so subconscious, this belief that like my child's going to be a monster if I don't make them into a good person. It was subtle, this underlying belief that I had. And I think
And I think I think it shows up in our society all over, like the way we talk about kids. Like I remember when I had my third, or I was pregnant with my third, and like someone was like, "Oh my gosh, now you're outnumbered," right? Like again, and it's
yes,
so subtle, but it's pervasive. So yes,
exactly. It's subtle but pervasive. Exactly. And so what I would say is like, for me, really trusting, really, really leaning into this trust that my children are good people. They simply need me to recognize it, to trust it, to when I correct them, to correct them from that place of trusting that, of course, they were trying to meet a need. Of course, it was coming from a good place inside of them. They just were struggling the same way I sometimes struggle to find the appropriate strategy, to really trust that. And the more I trusted that, the more I trusted it. And the more I see that it's so, so, so true. And the less I feel the need to resort to strategies like punishing or yelling or like, because I really, really trust that like they have the desire to do well, and they are truly, truly divine beings. And like I said, it's not for me, it's not, I try to make it as little like ephemeral or just like theoretical, and much more practical in the way that I do things. So yeah, that's a myth I would want to, I
right.
would wish, I would wish, yeah.
And I love how it aligns so much with what you're talking about, having compassion for ourselves, right? Because if we understand that their behavior is communication, and it's communicating a need to us, and our behavior is communication about our needs, then it's beautiful. Wow. This has been amazing, amazing, amazing. I love how you've given us mindsets, and you've also given us practicalities of how to bring that compassion into our lives, into our parenting for our kids as well. Thank you so much, Blimie. If parents want to learn more from you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's my name, BlimieHeller.com, and I spell Blimie with an I-E at the end. Most people think it's just B-L-I-M-I. So BlimieHeller.com, and on there I have I linked my Instagram account. I share daily, more or less daily parenting. I share little skits and videos of scenarios. I also share like ideas. And again, I really try to share it in a way that holds parents with a lot of compassion as well. And I share that on my WhatsApp status as well. And I have the link to join my WhatsApp status there. I also send out emails, newsletters, if parents don't have WhatsApp or don't have Instagram and they still want to be in the loop. It's free, and you can sign up on my website for that as well. I also give a course, my essentials course, twice a year. It's like my popular course that I give, and that you can sign up for my wait list on my website at any time and be notified when registration opens. I also actually recently started another course with my sister that goes even deeper into everything that I teach, so that we can embody it even more. And that you can also find on my website. Yeah.
And I'll put it all in the show notes as well, so you can find it there. Thank you ever so much, Blimie, for your time today and for helping parents do this important job. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciated the dialogue.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your questions for future episodes. And please take a moment, think about someone else who might benefit from this, and forward it on to them. If you enjoyed this podcast, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully, for more insights on how to bring meaning, joy, love into your life based on timeless Jewish wisdom. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out.